And so, not only the man who introduced us to the worst human being ever to come through Major League Baseball, but the man who gave a British man the penis every British man wishes for. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-creator of EASTBOUND and Down, my friend Jody Hill. I was telling you outside that I just thought these two episodes kind of dovetail perfectly, the last episode and the first episode. And you were saying that wasn't entirely intentional.
Well, I guess it is now that you mentioned it. At first I was like, is there, because sometimes, like, I remember the first treatment that I did with you, you were speaking about the show on a level that I probably didn't even think of it.
I was really drunk. Please forgive me for that.
And, so I guess I was thinking thematically. But yeah, the last gym scene where they're shooting it, that's what it all comes down to.
But it's just this thing I said in the introduction, these guys who really come out of 70s movies who are kind of delusional but have these enormous egos and don't realize how much they're hurting people. How much of that is you, Jody Hill?
I hope very little.
But I mean, that's a really interesting sort of character archetype to go back to. I mean, these guys who inadvertently do so much damage to people around them.
Yeah, and when we started doing the show, like, there weren't a lot of shows. Nowadays, you have your Mad Men's and you know, like Breaking Bad and stuff with these kind of darker characters that make kind of messed up choices. When we started doing the show, there wasn't a lot of that on TV or just out there anymore. And you know, going to school with Danny and David and a lot of the guys, Ben Best, who, like, you know, we all went to school together and we watched all these movies from the 70s and kind of, I mean, Five Easy Pieces, we pretty much stole the ending from, you know, at the end of the first season. And that we tied it in a little bit more, I think, but, you know, the same action happens. But there just wasn't a lot of that on TV, so yeah, we wanted to make a kind of a real character piece with this thing.
And this woman, speaking of Five Easy Pieces, who continually makes the wrong choice in being with Candy Powers. I mean, she's, by the way, she's a great character too, because her heart is way too big for any normal person. And that's a great sort of, where does she come from?
I was telling you a little bit about this backstage, but, like, we tried to cast for this role, for the role of April, for weeks. I mean, we probably had 7 or 8 sessions, and, you know, we had an LA casting director, and they're bringing in all these, like, kind of blonde LA actresses, and we were like, no, nobody looks like that back home. Like, this isn't what we want for this role. And then Katie walked in and, like, a mini skirt and, like, you know, all pushed up and, like, was like, hey, pumpkin, when she walked in the door, and we were immediately like, that's her, that's the girl.
But I just meant in the writing, though, in creating that character, somebody who's really the other side of Kenny, and he tends to surround himself with people who are way too generous to him, and I just wonder where those guys, like, come from.
Well, with Katie, you know, I mean, we weren't trying to make so much of a statement, but we were really just trying to say, like, okay, who is April? Like, who is his love interest? And you see a little bit of that, like, in pieces with her. Like, this season you see when she gets too drunk at the water park and stuff like that. Like, she was the kind of cool girl who, see, Kenny has probably always been the man up until a certain point. Like, in high school, he was the jock. He was the guy who everybody looked up to, for better, for worse. And he probably had the hottest girl back there, or the one that could party with him and all that kind of stuff. So that April has a backstory too that we don't necessarily, you know, go into as much as we do with Kenny. Right. But, you know, you get the idea through little things that, you know, she's seen some shit also.
Well, I love so many things in the last episode. That whole reverie at the end, that's a little bit of the color purple and a little bit of Batman and. And you were saying, because I had assumed that you were probably written the last episode first and kind of went backwards from that, but you didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff in the kind of vision of how life is going to become are just like jokes and things that we had all season long. Like, at one point we were talking about doing Kenny was going to be like making an independent film the whole time, and like. And we had a whole storyline where Stevie was really upset because Kenny had cast a person with Down syndrome to play the role because Kenny thought that person, like, represented Stevie, you know, like it was like, so that's kind of it became a kind of a joke, you know what I mean? But that was a storyline at one point.
Well, and I also love too the movie hair everybody has in that last sequence, like Stevie's future hair with the glasses that LeVar Burton wears from Star Trek.
I mean, Kenny has like we know when we were starting out the show, we don't know, like none of us watch sports. We don't know anything about baseball or anything like that.
Which I think is the greatest thing about the show.
Yeah. But we watch a lot of movies, and read stuff. So kind of the one thing that we can get away with stuff in is when Kenny's a writer, like.
Yeah, when the show starts him writing, and the last episode's about him
he's
writing
a writer,
too.
which I mean,
sort of.
He wrote a draft of a screenplay and speaks into a tape recorder, but I guess that's writing. And so yeah, whenever you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you can kind of get away with the kind of jokes that we know about.
But I even thought, and for me, and you think it was different for you guys, but the end of the first episode where he's strutting out at after this weird fantasy, and the janitors go, "Where the fuck is he going?" And then at the end, I was almost wondering if that whole thing was kind of another delusion that he had, where he wasn't really back together with April, but it's just this thing in his head. But you said that wasn't entirely your intention either, right?
I mean, the flash forward is pretty much, Kenny's. I guess we kind of were pretty literal with it, The flash forward is Kenny's new version of the script and how he sees his life going. But yeah, I assume they're going to still be together. I mean, she loves him, and I don't know how long that's going to last for. That's kind of the main thing.
Well, yeah, because I was saying to you too that when he gets to host the Powers Hour, and he says you don't know how long the dragons are going to be back in his cave. I mean, that basically is the only moment of self-awareness he ever really has in the entirety of the show.
Yeah, I mean, when we started the show, we were very much like, this is about a character that you constantly want to change, but he never really does. So, I think Kenny's changed that much since the beginning of the show, and that's about it. So that's kind of, I don't know. Again, that was a lot, at the time, things like My Name is Earl was like, My Name is Earl? Yeah, that was like the big Southern show at the time, where this guy's having like a change every episode. You know what I mean? Like by the end, he's a fucking saint. You know what I mean? And like we were like, okay, we don't want to do anything like that. We just want like the smallest change ever. So that's what we did.
But it's kind of a big change because in the first episode we see he's basically an unrepentant racist, and then in his movie fantasy he's married to an African tribeswoman.
Yeah. See, Kenny, I don't think Kenny. Okay, Kenny is racist, sort of, I guess.
No,
but
not sort of.
Yeah. Well, he's all things bad, right? But he's also a bundle of contradictions. You know what I mean? Like, and in terms of like the racism, the sexism, the homophobia, all that stuff, we kind of said that. He's got to be so self-absorbed that, he kind of can throw out these blanket statements and to everybody. But in the writing, we make sure he throws it out to kind of everybody equally. And that way, ultimately, he's the biggest joke of it all,
But it's interesting because I was saying this to you backstage too a little bit, that every season you brought in a big guest star who to some extent is a worse person than Kenny is. Like his dad, and then the Russian superstar, and then Guy Young this season. Yeah. Every season has been somebody who's, no, Kenny's terrible, but these people are much worse than
That's the secret. That's the secret to it all. Like, we've figured that out early on, that, like, Kenny can be the biggest son of a bitch in the world if, like, his enemy is worse.
And even the first season with Craig Robinson and with Will Ferrell. And I've told you, my favorite scene of all time is when Will's going, just like a pair of Georgia plums about to ripen. Yeah. And just looking at Craig and Danny trying not to laugh as Will is doing the speech is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
That guy, I mean, you just wind him up and let him go. He made up that whole thing pretty much. Yeah.
That's such a great, insane speech.
He did, like, when he came down, it was a little, it was great, but it was also totally weird because he was almost doing this, like a Gone with the Wind accent, like the kind of Southern accent that doesn't exist anymore. and we kind of let him go with that. And that was actually the inspiration for the whole plantation thing. We're like,
yes,
this guy's real old South, like the kind of South that burned down, you know.
yes, the kind of South again, and he's worse than Kenny, and then by that time he's really worse than Kenny. He's got like a fake plantation.
He kills a man.
Yes. It has these Asians who don't know what's going on in the fake plantation. I mean, that's the craziest thing in the history of television, Jody.
Some people didn't like that episode. Some people thought we jumped out of, the box too much. Maybe like we it's a pretty grounded show, and that one definitely pushes things the furthest. Yeah.
But again, that to me felt like this thing that you guys have done in every season, where you create somebody or bring somebody back for Kenny to go up against who's a much worse person than he is. So that has the effect of kind of humanizing him a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's where you can tell. Kenny has dreams, which is like, I think why people can get behind him. And when there's somebody who's like out there to try and stop those, then I think that's kind of all an audience needs in order to like get behind a main character. And, we use that trick time and time again, and this year it was Ken Marino, Guy Young,
And just talk about the way you cast. I mean, just casting Jason Sudeikis or getting Ken Marino. How do you cast the parts of these guys who are worse people than Kenny?
Well, I don't know if Sudeikis falls in that.
But he hates him. I mean, he justifiably hates him.
Well, yeah.
So his twin brother.
His twin brother. Yeah, his twin brother definitely hates him. But like Sudeikis was one of those guys who, like, during the funeral episode, we always thought it was going to be like hilarious. That Kenny goes to this funeral and plays Candlebox. We thought that was like just so funny that everybody's going to love it. And when talking to friends and family and like the things that people would write about it, like people thought that was a really dark episode because they were like sad that Shane died, and we thought it was like, this guy's an asshole. Nobody's gonna care that he's dead, but I judged wrong. Ken Marino, there's not many people who can be like jockey types who are funny. There just aren't that many people out there. You know what I mean? And I was just a fan of Ken's. I'd seen him. From the state, I was a fan of his, but then recently did Burning Love, which is really funny. And it's just he wasn't available for the longest time, and then when he was, we snatched him up.
Because too, you've also you guys have written these foes of Kenny as people who are actually more megalomaniacal than Kenny is. I mean, you sort of like the difference between a megalomaniac and Narcissus. Yeah, I mean, right, but there are differences, and it's kind of fun to write those differences too, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. Each year we kind of rip off a different movie, third season was Kramer versus Kramer, they dropped the baby off. And then this season was A Face in the Crowd, and obviously, and that was just a guy whose like fame had like gone to his head too much, and it was almost like a precautionary tale for Kenny. And Kenny at the last minute decides he's not willing to go that far, so that's his kind of one redeeming thing to him.
But I love too the idea, and I was telling you this, that Sacha Baron Cohen showing up with Simon Cowell's hair, and I mean that's a great character too.
Yeah, that was Sacha's idea. I mean, we had read that role was this big, and when we got Sacha to do it, he just went to town and he had all these ideas. In fact, we had like multiple writers like just taking care of Sacha in terms of all the ideas he had. He came up with the whole Simon Cowell thing and the fake tan and all that. And the boy was like,
I mean, that's really spooky. Why are you going to do this in front of this little boy who has herpes? What? Where did he get herpes from?
I don't know.
Hey, you wrote this stuff, so.
I write some of it, then it just kind of takes on a life of its own.
But the second season, when he's in the jungle, I mean, it's almost kind of Apocalypse Now a little bit, and
Apocalypse Now, and also, I don't know, like a spaghetti western, which not so much like the way we shot it, but just like in Kenny's mind, he thinks that he's the gunfighter that has to like come to the town that's being overrun, but that's Mexico to him, you know, and the Mexican baseball team.
Which again is
And,
another way of his racism coming out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But see, how we're equal opportunity offenders is if you notice when he comes out with the American flag in Mexico, he also takes the American flag and in celebration spikes it on the ground. So it's like it's two countries we're taking out.
But I was sort of touched too by the last shot being the shot of the baseball. Which I was wondering how you decide, or why you decided to end it with that shot of the ball on the desk.
I mean, that just seemed like what it was all about, I guess. You know, I mean, you kind of wonder what makes Kenny Powers. You know what I mean? And like, what would Kenny be if he couldn't throw the ball fast?
Because that's the question too. I mean, because that doesn't. I mean, this is the one season where his baseball abilities don't come into play at all. I mean, it's really not a part of it. It's more about his past as an athlete than his athletic ability. And to take that away from yourselves, which is something has been kind of a go-to in each of the previous seasons, I thought was a really interesting decision to make, and I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, we intentionally didn't want to, him to go on the baseball quest this year.
Okay.
But I don't know. I guess we just kind of thought it said something about him without kind of spelling it all out, you know? It was just like, if there's never going to be another Eastbound and Down, you know, and he's like we kind of thought in the show in terms of like, you know, classic like Greek mythology, like here's a hero, you know, and that's kind of where the whole kind of structure came from, you know, of like a modern day hero, modern day warrior. And I guess we wanted him to lay down his sword at the end.
Because it's almost, in that respect, it's almost like Odysseus, you know. I mean, and going through each of these labors and each one of these seasons being kind of like another country, isn't it?
Yeah, and also like, you know, when they return home, that's kind of like a big thing. There's always one more battle to fight. You know?
But one of the only thing that I wanted to see that I didn't get to see in the last episode was hearing that Freddie King song played over the end credits, because I love that song so much.
Yeah, you know, we did that in the season finale, the first season. We kept the song going past the credits. So I don't know. We were kind of like, we brought it back in the opening episode this year during the car race.
Yeah, you did. But I've always loved the way you use music on the show. I mean, this last episode with Queen and with the Jay Giles songs. How do you pick the songs for the show?
Queen is one of my favorite. I mean, I used them in my movie. Yeah. You know, it used to be Danny and me pretty much would pick all the songs, and since then we've got like now a music guy and stuff. But I mean, we try to go with songs that you should know but don't. You know, so I hate hearing the same songs in every movie and every TV show. So we try to go deeper. You know, and I don't know, just because that's kind of the fun part. I always liked how Martin Scorsese uses like pop songs and movies, and I don't know film scores. I have buddies that like can tell you the score from every movie. I can't tell you anything like that, and so I guess that's where all the pop music comes from.
Really? Because I always thought in that first season when you play "Love Will Turn You Around," that's a quote from Six Pack. Am I mistaken?
Well, no, I know the pop songs from the movies, but not the score pieces, not the John Williams and shit.
But that really made me laugh. I mean, it's not by no means. Anybody here ever seen Six Pack? Kenny Rogers, Diane. Thank you.
Three people. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
They probably worked on the movie, but
it's not that good.
But that song is also one of the most sentimental moments in that movie. Too.
It works, yeah, and like that scene seems so cheesy to us. Like we're pretty harsh. We're like everybody's like, "Yay, Kenny!" at the end, and it's like all he did is put a guy's eye out, and so we were like,
no, this is a riot. They're destroying somebody's business. It's terrifying.
I think it was the kiss with April at the end over top of all that. It was like, this feels like a movie, like fake movie world. So we were like, this needs I feel like it. I think we were like, this feels like that cheesy moment in Six Pack. And it was literally like, well, why don't we just use the Six Pack song?
And you guys got to see the pilot. The song that's playing when Kenny is having to take the test to be a substitute teacher is the song that's always made me laugh, and you use it really well. It's a song called "The Organist Entertains" by Tindersticks, and it's so completely self-consciously poignant. Yeah. There's no better moment to use than the moment that the hero is being completely self-pitying. Yeah. and that look on his face, that zombie looks he's taking the test. That's such a great moment.
Yeah, we actually put that at the end of the second episode first.
Oh.
And when we realized when Stevie gets in the car with Kenny at the end of that episode, it's such like a kind of a down moment. It's a victory sort of, but when we did that, we all were just like, that's it. That's the sound of Eastbound right there. It's like sad,
Like over the top sad.
Over the top sad.
sad.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
melodrama.
laugh. Yeah. It's
And,
almost like Douglas Sirk. It's so over the top that you kind of laugh at it a little
funny,
bit.
right? Yeah, that's the idea. Which when the show aired the first season, nobody watched it. I mean, it wasn't like a big ratings thing. It was like, no, people went back and I guess they told their friends about it, and they would watch it on demand and stuff. And so it wasn't until after the first season people kind of got on board with this show. So I think it was things like that where you say it's like so sad that it's funny. I think people just kind of thought it was depressing the first season.
Oh God, because you even like go back to it because I just rewatched all these. In the fourth episode where he's going, people think my life is great, but I'm just super sad. Yeah. So here, and the question I've always wanted to ask you, I'll ask you this now in front of an audience, the reverse Apache Master. What does that mean?
You put me on the spot here. You know what? I'll explain it to you. It's one of those sex moves. I think it involves like sitting. Oh, never mind. I don't.
Well, if you can't see it on HBO, it must be really, really dirty. But I mean, what's so great too is that in this last season, just seeing how, I mean, in some weird way, Guy Young is kind of like the worst version of Kenny.
Yeah.
And was that your idea for that too? Sort of this guy who could be the nightmare version of Kenny? Again, just going back to the idea of somebody who's worse than Kenny is?
Yes. He serves two purposes. He's also a mentor. And
the person who's, like, again, people always tend to offer Kenny a hand.
Right. And, in the world of professional athletes, which I did not know until we started writing the show, but, it seems like there's two kinds once they retire. The kind that just, like, become like Guy Young and are able to, like, make their, whatever celebrity they had in sports work for them outside of it. They're hosting shows, whatever, owning businesses, things like that. And then there's the kind that have, like, turned to drugs, lost all their money, all that kind of shit. And, like, Kenny.
Like Kenny.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And we wanted Guy Young to kind of serve as, like, the other side of that story. So, and that way he's like a mentor and kind of shows him how he can use that celebrity to, like, have this awesome post-sports life. And, yeah, so he's a mentor in that way. And then also we wanted to show kind of the dark side of that. And the idea of the show, that was like a really big breakthrough for us. Originally we're going to make this season about the Hall of Fame. Yeah, because we were like, well, that's what you do after sports, right? You try to get in the Hall of Fame. But we worked on that for months, and it was a dry well. I mean, like, it was like, all it is like letter writing campaigns and, like, shit like that. So I was like, how are we going to make an episode out of this? But we tried for forever. And then when we had the breakthrough to have the sports sesh thing, that was huge. Then the episode started to flow.
Oh, because the other thing that you do in every season of the show, starting with the beginning, is Kenny starts at the worst place he could possibly be in, at the beginning of every season.
Yeah, and this one was basically like, okay, at the end of last season, it's like, the hero gets to ride off into the sunset with the girl, and we wanted to take this from the place where, like, well, what happens after that? You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, like, the sunset with the girl sucks. It's boring, And, like, so Kenny actually doesn't have it that bad. He's got, like, a nice house, and, like, his wife has a good job. His kids are okay, and he's just miserable.
Yeah, because in his idea, he's completely emasculated.
Yeah. Usually he's broke, and, like, this season it's not like that. And also this season we wanted to explore Kenny with money, which he's never had that before. So that was kind of one of the other things that we wanted to get into.
Well, we're going to test that a little bit in the first season where he, like, spends way too much money when he buys the Denali because he can't afford to get the Escalade.
As soon as he gets money. Yeah.
And
not the Denali with the Escalade interior. That's what it was. That's how we asked for an Escalade, but they couldn't find an Escalade like we wanted to in Wilmington. So guy said he's got a Denali with the Escalade interior. We're like, what the fuck is that? So we're like, all right. So we used that in the show.
Well, that's the other thing I love too that seems to me to be particularly sort of Southern athlete is the throwing away of money on some insane car, which he's done basically in almost every season. I mean, the crazy truck with the gull wings and all that stuff. I mean, how do you guys pick the cars for this show?
I don't know. It's literally like we'll sit around and think of like what the dumbest thing is to spend money on. Like that Viper. People had Vipers that they would like let us use, and they were cool looking. We were like, no, it's got to look stupid. It's got to be green.
Yes, not even the cool red, but also Vipers are like, you ever been one? They're really hot.
They're hot, yeah. They're like $100,000 or something too. It's ridiculous.
I know it's like the most expensive lemon in the world, but people keep buying them. And I guess we talked about this on the show, but I want to have you talk to the audience a little bit about it. The idea of making like a movie where basically each episode ends and you pick up almost right after where with the following episode, where the previous episode ended. The idea of making it feel like a movie. Where did that idea come from?
At the time, Danny and myself were watching The British Office, and we thought that was so cool that like, you know, here's a contained amount of episodes, and it goes, you know, it kind of leads to a point at the end, and that's kind of what we wanted to do is like look at each season like a mini movie like that, you know, like now things have kind of changed in TV. You see it a lot more, you know, even comedy shows on HBO have changed, but like when we started this, shows weren't really doing that often, you know. Every comedy was a reset, and like that had a lot to do with our choice to go to Mexico also, because if he would have stayed a gym teacher, it would have been basically a sitcom, you know. He's like, here's the situation, here's the comedy in that situation, yeah. So we wanted to break away from that, just to break away from like any type of traditional like comedy TV format.
But it also felt to me, and we talked about this a little bit before too on the show, a way to really explore character in the way that comedies don't do, because comedies don't tend to be about that. Yeah,
and exactly. And like the fact that you put Kenny on the road kind of lets you do that. Especially TV and, I mean, comedy and the movies are the same fucking way. It's always just the jokes, and it's never about the character, you know? But, like, we weren't really comedy fans, so we wanted to make, I mean, I like comedies, I don't mean it like that, but, like, I don't get excited about, you know, going to see a comedy like I would, you know, maybe a Coen Brothers film or something. And, you know, we really wanted to make a kind of a real character, or at least a funny real character, and have him go wherever he's going to go. And I think with like Mexico especially, like that was kind of an intentional choice to like, okay, we're gonna make him go away from his situation and break out of that.
But also, and you just mentioned melodrama before, the way this shows kind of skirt that fine line in each episode between melodrama and comedy, and it really is a much finer line than drama and comedy is, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we try to play the things that should be funny, serious, and the things that should be serious, funny. And so, yeah, with like, you know, when Kenny's, like in the scene at Christmas, you know, where he's talking to his brother about how lucky he is to be unforgettable. You know, it's like, it's a meaningful scene, but it's just ridiculous. But then things like the sports sesh, when he goes onto that the first time, I mean, that's played like a gladiator battle. So, you know, that's kind of the Eastbound recipe.
Well, also the Eastbound recipe too is that he never lets his past go away, and just have the near the end of the episode with him playing out a scene in the movie from the first season of the show where he steals April away from Cutler.
Yeah.
Talk about the guy we just talking about outside, the guy you got to play Kenny in the movie.
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is, that's probably how Kenny saw the first season. It's just he came in like a knight in shining armor, just, you know, won the school over completely and got the girl. The guy we got to play that, he was a local model. We figured that came from, again, us when we were going to make the whole season about making the movie, that he was upset because none of the guys were good looking enough, none of the actors were good looking enough. So he had to get a mactor, a model actor. Like that was his whole thing. So he got a model to play himself, you know.
Of course, because
he sees April as boobs, and Stevie, you know, we saw Stevie.
Yes. Also, I like too that his daughter in the fantasy ends up marrying a guy who looks kind of like the nightmare version of Cutler.
Yeah, he just obviously has no respect for color still.
But talk about the casting for the show too, because the actors. I mean, talk about finding Steve Little, who is just incredible.
I mean, there's so much of it that like Steve Little, it looks like we had to have known this guy, but really he just came in the room. And with Steve Little, okay, so all these actors, Hollywood's a weird place to cast because everybody's like, they don't seem real necessarily, a lot of people. And like, I think especially when this thing started, we were really sensitive to that. And you have a lot of guys coming in for that role who were like kind of cool dudes who were dressing up nerdy and like pretending to be nerds. Whereas like Steve came in, and I think Steve was trying to be cool. And we were like, this is the guy we want.
And were you expanding the part for him once you saw what you had with him, that he was just pure gold?
Yeah, we knew he was going to be the sidekick, and then it just, yeah, I mean, he's so much fun to write for, Kenny, he's one of those guys that you can get away with going a little bit bigger, I mean, we go big with Kenny, but with Stevie, you can go really big, like he blows his chin off and shit, so like...
But the other thing that runs through the show, too, is that in every season, Kenny faces like a kind of ultimate humiliation he has to bounce back from.
Yeah.
Which I find to be a really interesting thing to do because he bounces back from it, but again, he never learns anything from the humiliation. I mean, he still goes on being Kenny Powers.
Right, yeah.
And I was wondering, too, in the writing, when you guys decided to sort of keep going back to that well, because it works really beautifully all the time.
We actually changed it a little bit this season. Like in the past, around episode 4 or 5, something like that. He, which again goes to what you were saying about one big movie. It's like each season is structured like a movie, and if you look in kind of like a movie's running time, if you spread out the 6 hours or 4 hours into whatever a 3-act structure would be like, that's usually where the character suffers like a fatal blow or whatever, and has to learn about himself in order to kind of have his big rise at the end. And this season, we intentionally kind of stayed away from that because we always thought we were going real hard, which, because it worked so well in the past, we were kind of like, we got to change this up. And this season is more of like a Goodfellas or a Boogie Nights kind of thing, where it spins and spins and spins until it spins out of control. And that's why this season, the closest thing to that I would say is April, but really in that same episode, he wins his greatest victory. Like he takes Guy Young out and gets the show. So I don't know, we stayed away from it a little bit this year.
But I guess I sort of felt like the penultimate episode, the Christmas episode of the Sesh, of the Kenny Powers show, felt like kind of the ultimate humiliation. It felt a little bit like that to me.
Yeah, probably, except his behavior is rewarded this time, which usually he has to come and make amends and all that stuff, which was kind of like we did a nod to that when he shows up to everybody. And he's like, I'm going to make a change. And then they're like, no, we like what you did. Again, that was us kind of like playing with what we'd done in the past.
Now, I remember when the show was announced it was finishing, you were telling me, and I kept this a secret, that you were going to do one more season.
That's right.
Does this feel like it's the end? Because people are going to be clamoring for it, because people love Kenny Powers.
Yeah, this definitely is the end. I say that, it's the end for now. We might come back and Kenny is the kind of guy, it's like, because it's a character piece, I feel like you could go to him in 10 years and it's like our Before Sunrise, maybe, you can just kind of check in with these guys. Same exact thing. And you could check into him and, check in with him in 10 years or something, see what he's up to. I'm sure it's something horrible.
But I just sort of felt like, too, in watching the shows, that the idea that if you just moved it 2 degrees in either direction, it's really drama. How tough was it to constantly sort of play with that line? I mean, you just talked about the funeral episode, which I thought was funny. I didn't realize that people didn't respond to it as comedy.
Yeah, well, we write it, we structure it like a drama. Okay. Everything is there's never anything of this plot line will be funny, Well, this plot line will give us jokes, but the thing is real, if that makes sense. So whatever he's going through, ultimately in the show, it follows the same structure that any drama would. You know what I mean? the stakes are real, you know, the things that happen are real, and then we just write the dialogue funny, you know, like that's one thing that I think it's also like maybe a Southern thing where like we have jokes, but a lot of the jokes in it are like how you say it or how you approach the scene versus like
You're not writing gags.
you're not writing gags, exactly, and we try to stay away from that. We do sometimes. I don't mean it like that. Like we're not like above it, you know, but generally speaking, that we write towards the character and write for the plot, you know, and then the jokes come on top of that, you know.
Well, you were telling me about one episode that you wanted to do for the first season that HBO wouldn't let you do, the white supremacist episode, which sounded...
Oh, it's Devil Worshippers.
Devil Worshippers, that's what it was. Tell them if they know this
was the only episode that HBO never let us do. It was basically Clegg gets kidnapped by devil worshippers. He like owes them money for drugs. And Kenny, the whole time Cassie had been trying to get Kenny to go to church because she was worried about his soul. So
remind them who Cassie is.
Cassie is Dustin's wife, his sister-in-law. So
who's insane, but she's so good.
She's really good. Yeah, Jennifer Irwin. She's amazing. And basically they have to go rescue Clegg, and the episode ends with Kenny bringing one of the devil worshippers to church and trying to curb him on the altar. Like American History X style, you know, like bite the fucking altar, you know? And they stop it. And HBO didn't want us to do it, but this was before the show was made, so like now they would probably let us do it because I think they thought it was going to be like real devil worshippers, you know, but we kind of pictured them as like the devil worshippers like we knew back home, where they're like wearing baggy raver pants and like they're also into Star Wars, you know, like they're not real devil worshippers. It's just kind of like heavy metal kids, you know, yeah, man, I'm into the devil.
And that is a great place in it. Let's thank Jody Hill for being here tonight.
Thank you.